Don't go. They're waiting outside. The words left my mouth before I had permission to speak them. My hand, rough from years of polishing silver and wringing out sanitizer-soaked cloths, clamped around the sleeve of a cashmere coat that cost more than my entire year's rent. The fabric was soft, impossibly soft, but the muscle underneath it turned to stone the instant I made contact. Junho stopped. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at my hand on his arm, and he didn't look at the heavy oak door he had been about to push open. He just went still, a terrifying kind of stillness that made the air in the restaurant vestibule drop 10 degrees. He slowly turned his head, his dark eyes sliding from the rainy street outside to my face. There was no gratitude in that look. There was only calculation. He was assessing if I was a threat, a distraction, or a lunatic. "Excuse me," his voice was low, a smooth baritone that barely carried over the hum of the wine fridges, yet it felt heavy enough to crush me. "The black SUV," I whispered, dropping my hand from his arm as if I'd touched a hot stove. I stepped back, hugging my leather order pad against my chest like armor. 3 spots down from the valet stand. Engine is running, but the lights are off. They've been circling the block for 20 minutes, and they stopped exactly when you stood up to pay the bill. Junho stared at me. For a second, I thought he was going to ignore me and walk out into the rain anyway. The dining room was empty, save for the sous chef packing up in the back and the low glow of the chandeliers dimmed for the night. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Nobody came to La Toile at this hour unless they were running from something or looking for something. Junho had come for espresso, double shot. He had sat at table 4, back to the velvet wall, eyes on the door. He was a professional. But even professionals miss things when they're looking at the obvious threats and ignoring the background noise. I was the background noise. I was just the server. "Show me," he said. It wasn't a request. He moved to the side of the floor-to-ceiling window, pressing his back against the velvet curtain so he wouldn't be visible from the street. I moved next to him, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pointed through the condensation on the glass, careful not to touch the pane. "See the exhaust?" I murmured. "It's cold tonight. The vapor is rhythmic. Someone is feathering the gas to keep the heater on, but they don't want the brake lights to flare. There are 2 men in the front, 1 in the back. The one in the passenger seat hasn't looked at his phone once. He's just watching the door." Junho watched. He didn't blink. For 10 seconds, he just studied the shadow of the vehicle down the street. Then he saw it. The passenger door cracked open an inch, just enough to facilitate a quick exit, but not enough to trigger the interior dome light. He pulled back from the window, his expression shifting from annoyance to a sharp, predatory focus. He looked at me differently now. The dismissal was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp intensity. "Lock the door," he commanded. "I can't just." "Lock the door, Maya." He knew my name. He had read the brass pin on my vest probably hours ago. "If I walk out there, I die. If they come in here, we both die. Lock it." I didn't argue. I flipped the heavy deadbolt and killed the foyer lights. The metallic click echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Outside, the rain picked up, hammering against the glass, blurring the world into streaks of streetlights and black asphalt. We were trapped. Junho moved with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for a man in a suit that tailored. He didn't run, he glided. He swept past the maitre d' stand and headed straight for the kitchen, motioning for me to follow. The space was narrow, smelling of truffle oil, reduction sauces, and industrial cleaner. It was the smell of my life, the scent of invisibility, but tonight it smelled like a cage. "Is there a back exit?" he asked, his eyes scanning the stainless steel prep tables and the hanging copper pots. "Alleyway," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I hated that I sounded scared. I wanted to be the calm, competent person I was in my head, the one who noticed vintage wine labels and remembered regular customers' allergies from 3 years ago. But standing next to a man who radiated this kind of lethal energy was stripping away my composure. But it leads to a dead end. If they have a spotter on the roof or the corner, you'll be boxed in against the compactor. He nodded, accepting the tactical assessment without question. He pulled a phone from his inner pocket, glanced at the screen, and swore softly in Korean. The screen was dark. Jammers, he noted, sliding the phone back. They're thorough. This isn't a robbery. It's a liquidation. He looked at me, his dark eyes narrowing. You're observant for a server. I'm observant because I'm a server. I corrected him, finding a sudden spark of defiance. People don't look at the help. They talk in front of me, they plan in front of me, and they think I'm part of the furniture. You learn to read the room when your tips depend on knowing when a guy is about to fight with his wife or when a deal is going south. He leaned back against the walk-in freezer, crossing his arms. The posture was relaxed, but his hands were free, ready. And, what did you read tonight? You come here every Tuesday, but usually at 10 p.m. Tonight you were late. You changed your seat. You usually sit at table 2, but you took 4. Better sight lines. I took a breath, trying to steady my hands. And those guys outside? They didn't follow you here. They were waiting. The silence that followed was heavy. The refrigerator compressor kicked on with a shuddering rattle. Junho tilted his head, regarding me with a new level of scrutiny. Waiting, he repeated. They were parked before you pulled up, I said. I saw the SUV arrive at 1:45. You walked in at 1:55. They knew you were coming. He went very still again. This wasn't just an ambush, it was a setup. Someone had sold him out. The realization seemed to settle over him not with panic, but with a cold, hard anger. He looked at the digital clock above the pass. 2:15 a.m. If they were waiting, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was barely audible over the rain, then they aren't just outside. The implication hit me in the stomach. If they knew he was coming here, specifically now, they had inside information. Or worse, they had someone inside. My eyes darted to the swinging doors that led to the dining room. The sous chef, Old Man Miller, had left 20 minutes ago for a smoke break and hadn't come back. I hadn't thought anything of it. Miller was lazy and disappeared all the time. But now, the silence from the back alley door felt screamingly loud. Miller, I breathed. The chef. He left. Out the back. He left the back door unlocked. Junho pushed off the freezer. In his hand, a gun appeared. I hadn't seen him draw it. It was sleek, black, and terrifyingly real. Stay behind me, he said. We moved deeper into the kitchen, away from the warm glow of the heat lamps and into the shadows near the dish pit. The back door, a heavy steel slab that usually required a hard hip check to open, was slightly ajar. A sliver of wet, dark night air was leaking in, curling the steam rising from the dishwasher. Junho signaled for me to stop. He moved to the side of the doorframe, pressing himself flat against the wall. He listened. I held my breath, listening too. I heard the rain. I heard the distant wail of a siren that was going somewhere else, helpful to someone else. And then I heard the scrape of a shoe on concrete.
It was a small sound. Gritty.
The sound of leather turning on wet pavement. It came from just outside the door. Junho held up 2 fingers, then 1. He was counting down. He wasn't going to wait for them to breach. He was going to take the initiative. It was insane. It was suicide. There were at least 3 men out front, which meant there were likely 2 covering the back. He had 1 gun and a server.
No, easy.
He looked back at me, irritation flashing in his eyes. I pointed to the ceiling. Above the dish pit, there was a heavy ventilation grate, covered in dust. It was the intake for the old AC system that hadn't worked since the building was renovated. The crawl space, I whispered. It runs the length of the building. It dumps out in the janitor's closet of the law office next door. Junho looked at the grate, then at the door, measuring the odds. He holstered the weapon, or rather, he tucked it somewhere I couldn't see, and cupped his hands together to give me a boost. There was no discussion. He understood instantly. Tactical retreat was better than a fatal funnel. I stepped into his hands, my sneakers muddying his expensive suit, and he hoisted me up effortlessly. I shoved the grate aside. It groaned, a metal shriek that sounded like a scream in the quiet kitchen. The back door kicked open. There was no time to be graceful. I hauled myself into the dark, dusty void of the ceiling and reached down. Jun-ho didn't need much help. He jumped, catching the lip of the opening, and pulled himself up with a terrifying upper body strength. Gunshots erupted below us. Pop, pop, pop. Silenced but audible. Bullets punched through the ceiling tiles inches from my face, sending clouds of plastered dust into my eyes. We scrambled forward on our hands and knees, crawling over the metal rafters as the kitchen below swarmed with men who wanted us dead. Move, Jun-ho whispered behind me. Don't stop crawling. We were in the walls now. We were the rats. And for the first time all night, I felt a strange surge of power. They were looking for a target on the ground. They didn't know the building like I did. They didn't know that the upscale facade was just a skin, and I was moving through the bones. The crawl space was suffocating. It smelled of dry rot and dead mice. Sharp screws poked through the ductwork, snagging my uniform and scraping my knees raw. Every movement sent a vibration through the metal that I was sure would give us away, but the sound of the rain pounding on the roof directly above us masked our escape. I led the way. I knew this path because I'd hidden up here once before, years ago, when the owner's ex-husband had come in with a baseball bat looking for money. I knew exactly where the weak spots in the drywall were. I knew where the darkness was absolute. Behind me, Jun-ho was silent. For a man of his size, he moved with a haunting lack of noise. It was unnerving. I could feel his presence, a heat at my back, a pressure in the air, but I couldn't hear him breathe. Stop, he whispered. I froze. We were directly over the dining room now. Through the gaps in the drop-ceiling tiles, slivers of light cut through the darkness. We could see down. Below us, 3 men were moving through the restaurant. They wore tactical gear that looked too expensive for street thugs, black windbreakers, earpieces, efficient movements. They were sweeping the room. One of them, a tall man with a scar running through his eyebrow, was holding my order pad. He was reading it. She's not here, the man said into his radio. Kitchen is clear. Back alley is clear. No sign of the target or the civilian. Civilian. That was me. Just collateral damage waiting to happen. Check the basement. A voice crackled back over the radio. And check the perimeter. They didn't vanish. Jun-ho shifted his weight, peering through a crack in the tiles. He was memorizing their faces. I could feel the tension radiating off him, a coiled spring ready to snap. He wasn't thinking about escape anymore. He was thinking about revenge. We need to keep moving, I mouthed, hoping he could see me in the gloom. He didn't move. He was watching the tall man. The man had put my order pad down and was now wiping the mahogany host stand with a napkin, erasing his fingerprints. It was a casual gesture, almost domestic, and it chilled me to the bone. These weren't just killers, they were cleaners. If they caught us, there would be no bodies found. We would just cease to exist. Jun-ho tapped my ankle.
Go.
We crawled another 20 feet until we hit the firewall separating the restaurant from the law office. This was the tricky part. There was a service hatch, barely 2 feet square, intended for wiring access. It was bolted shut. I fumbled in my apron pocket for my keys. I had a multi-tool, a sleek little thing I used to open wine crates. I pulled it out, my fingers slick with sweat and dust. Let me, Jun-ho whispered. He took the tool from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, warm, steady, calloused. In the dark, the contact felt electric. He worked on the bolts with surgical precision, turning them slowly to avoid the squeak of rust. 1 bolt.
2.
The hatch came loose. He lowered it silently onto the insulation batting. We slipped through into the next building. The air here was different, sterile, smelling of carpet cleaner and toner. We were safe for the moment. But as I dropped down into the janitor's closet of the law firm, I realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a cold, shivering terror. Jun-ho dropped down beside me. He straightened his suit, brushed the plaster from his shoulders, and looked at me. For the first time, I saw something other than calculation in his eyes.
It was respect.
You have a name, Maya, he said quietly. It's Maya, I said, my voice cracking. I know, he said. I mean, you have a stake in this now. You saved my life. Which means your life is now tied to mine. Tied to yours? I let out a short, hysterical laugh. I leaned back against the shelves of paper towels, trying to find my breath. I just want to go home. I want to feed my cat. I want to forget I ever saw a black SUV. You can't, Junho said. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it like a fact, like gravity. They saw you. They have your pad. They know who you are. If you go home, they will be waiting. The reality of it crashed down on me. My apartment. My routine. My invisible, safe little life. It was gone. Burned to the ground the moment I tapped on his arm. So, what do we do? I asked, looking up at him. We survived the night, he said. And then I find out who sold me out. He moved to the door of the closet and cracked it open. The law office was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights outside. But first, we need to get out of this block. The perimeter is tight. They'll be watching the street. The linen van, I said. The idea came to me in a flash of memory. Junho looked back at me. What? The linen service for the restaurant. They pick up the tablecloths at 3 a.m. They park in the loading zone behind this building because the restaurant's alley is too narrow for their truck. They have a key to the service corridor. I checked my cheap digital watch.
2:48 a.m.
12 minutes, I said. Can you drive a truck? Junho asked. No, I said. But I can hide in a laundry cart. And I know the driver. His name is Stan. He wears headphones and never checks the back. Junho actually smiled then. It was a terrifying expression, sharp and wolfish, but it made him look human. Stan, he said, testing the name. Stan is going to be our best friend. We moved into the hallway of the law firm. We had 12 minutes to get to the loading dock, bypass the alarm system, and position ourselves before the truck arrived. And we had to do it while an assassination squad hunted for us next door. Stay close, Junho said. I didn't need the instruction. I was already moving, scanning the floor for motion sensors, checking the corners for shadows. I wasn't just a server anymore. I was a player in a game I didn't understand, and the only way to win was to keep playing. We reached the back corridor. Through the glass of the emergency exit, I could see the rain lashing the pavement. And there, parked across the street, was another black car. Not an SUV this time.
A sedan.
Watching the loading dock.
Dam, Junho said.
They covered the secondary exits. They don't know about the truck, I insisted. They're looking for people running. They aren't looking for dirty tablecloths. It's a risk. Staying here is a death sentence. He looked at me, then at the car outside. He nodded. Okay, we do it your way. He took off his ruined cashmere coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. It was heavy and smelled of rain and expensive cologne. Cover your uniform, he said. You're too bright in the dark. It was a small gesture, but it felt momentous.
He was shielding me.
I pulled the coat tight, drowning in the fabric. I felt ridiculous and terrified, and strangely, completely alive. Let's go, I whispered. And we stepped out into the dark. The interior of the laundry truck smelled of industrial detergent and damp cotton, a thick, chemical scent that coated the back of my throat. We were wedged between two canvas carts overflowing with stained white tablecloths, the metal frame of the truck rattling violently with every pothole Stan hit. I was shivering, not from cold, but from the aftershock of adrenaline leaving my system. The darkness was absolute, save for the occasional slash of amber light from a street lamp passing through the cracks in the rear doors. Junho sat across from me, his legs extended in the cramped space, his expensive suit ruined by the grime of the crawl space and the rain. He wasn't looking at the door, he was looking at me. Even in the dim, strobing light, I could feel the weight of his attention. It wasn't the assessing stare of the predator anymore. It was something heavier, something that made the air between us feel charged and thin. You're shaking, he said. His voice was a low rumble against the noise of the engine. He reached out, his hand finding mine in the dark. His skin was warm, his grip firm but careful, as if he were handling something fragile. He didn't let go. Breathe, Maya. You're safe. We made the perimeter. I've never been shot at before, I whispered, the confession feeling small and stupid in the face of his reality. I worry about rent. I worry about my cat getting sick. I don't worry about silencers. You shouldn't have to, he murmured. He leaned forward, closing the distance between us until our knees brushed. The space was so small, so intimate, that I could smell the faint trace of sandalwood beneath the dust and rain on him. He reached up and adjusted the collar of his cashmere coat, which was still draped over my shoulders. He pulled it tighter around my neck, his knuckles grazing my jawline. The touch was electric, lingering a second longer than necessary. You saved me tonight. That wasn't just luck. You have an instinct for this. Most people freeze. You moved. I just didn't want to die, I said, looking down at his hand, which was still resting on the lapel of the coat near my throat. No, he corrected softly. You didn't want me to die. You could have stayed behind the maitre d' stand. They wouldn't have touched you if you hadn't warned me. You chose to intervene. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, wiping away a smear of drywall dust. The gesture was shockingly tender, at odds with the gun I knew was tucked against his ribs. Why? I looked up at him. His eyes were dark pools, unreadable yet intensely focused. Because I saw them waiting, I said. And it wasn't fair. Nobody deserves to walk into a trap. He stared at me for a long moment, the truck swaying as we took a sharp turn. He didn't smile, but the hard lines around his eyes softened. Fair, he repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. In my world, nothing is fair. But tonight, you tipped the scales. He squeezed my hand once, a solid anchor in the chaos, before leaning back against the metal wall. He didn't let go of my hand for the rest of the ride. We sat in the dark, fingers interlaced, bound together by the silence and the secrets we were fleeing from. The truck eventually slowed, lurching to a halt in a district I recognized by the sound of the pavement changing from asphalt to cobblestone, the old warehouse district near the docks. Stan, bless his oblivious heart, opened the back doors and marched off toward a service entrance with his headphones still blasting, never once checking his cargo. We slipped out into the misty night, moving like ghosts into the shadows of a shipping container. Junho led me not to a warehouse, but to a nondescript steel door on the side of a renovated loft building. He punched a code into a keypad, no hesitation, purely from memory, and the lock disengaged with a heavy thud. The safe house was a stark contrast to the grime of the crawlspace. It was a minimalist apartment, all exposed brick and high-end furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slicked city. It was cold, uninhabited, a place designed for waiting, not living. Junho moved immediately to the windows, pulling the blackout shades down before turning on a single lamp. The light cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the exhaustion on his face. He took off his jacket, wincing slightly as he moved his left shoulder. "You're hurt," I said, the observation automatic. I stepped closer, my earlier fear replaced by the familiar, grounding routine of fixing things. The fall from the vent. "Just a bruise," he dismissed, but I was already moving to the kitchenette, searching the cabinets. I found a first aid kit. Standard issue, efficient, just like him. I brought it to the sofa where he Saturday. "Let me see," I said. He hesitated, then unbuttoned his shirt. A dark, angry bruise was blooming across his ribs where he'd hit the edge of the dumpster on the landing, and a shallow cut on his shoulder was sluggishly bleeding. I cleaned the cut with antiseptic. He didn't flinch, but his breathing shifted, becoming slower, more deliberate. I could feel his eyes on my face as I worked, watching my hands. "You have gentle hands," he said quietly. The air in the room seemed to contract, pulling us closer. "It's part of the job," I murmured, focusing intently on the bandage I was applying. "People come to the restaurant to be taken care of, even if it's just wine and filet." "I don't have anyone who takes care of me," he admitted. The vulnerability in his voice was so slight, so carefully controlled, that it hit me harder than a shout. He reached out and caught my wrist, stopping my hand. "Maya." I looked up. We were inches apart. The danger of the night was still outside, pressing against the glass, but in here, it was just the hum of the refrigerator and the heat radiating off him. He looked at me not as a tactical asset, but as a woman who had seen him weak and hadn't looked away. "Who knew you were coming to the restaurant tonight?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, breaking the spell but deepening the intimacy. I needed to solve this. For him. His thumb traced the pulse point on my inner wrist. Only my lieutenant. And the driver. The driver was waiting outside, I said, my mind racing back to the pattern I'd seen through the window. But the signal, remember the passenger door? It cracked open. That wasn't an exit. That was a signal. I pulled my hand back gently to grab a piece of paper from the coffee table. I needed to draw it out. The SUV arrived at 1:45. You arrived at 1:55. But the streetlights on 24th Street are on a timer. They flicker at 2 a.m. exactly. The passenger door opened at 2 a.m. It wasn't a signal to the men in the car. It was a signal to someone watching from the apartment complex across the street. Jun-ho sat up straighter, the pain forgotten. The predator was back, but this time, I was his partner, not his prey. "The apartment complex," he murmured. "My lieutenant owns a unit there. He uses it for storage." He wasn't storing anything, I said, the pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. He was watching to make sure you went in. The ambush wasn't the men in the car. They were the distraction. The real hit was supposed to happen inside. That's why Miller left the back door open. Your lieutenant paid him off. Jun-ho stood up, pacing the room. The energy coming off him was lethal, but when he looked back at me, there was a fierce pride in his expression. "You saw the lights flicker," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You saw the timing." "I notice patterns," I said. "You notice everything," he corrected. He walked back to me, stopping just short of touching me again. "You just gave me the name of the man who tried to kill me." "We have to flush him out," Jun-ho said. He had changed into a fresh shirt from the closet, a black button-down that made him look even more like a shadow come to life. He was checking the magazine of his weapon, the metallic clicks sharp and rhythmic. "He thinks I'm dead. Or trapped in the perimeter. If I go quiet, he'll assume he won. He'll meet with the buyers to finalize the takeover." "He won't meet them at the warehouse," I said, sitting on the edge of the sofa, still wrapped in his coat. It felt like armor now. "He'll meet them somewhere public. Somewhere he feels safe. Where does he go when he wants to celebrate?" "The Sapphire Lounge," Jun-ho said instantly. "Private rooms in the back. High security." "He'll be there tonight," I said. "He'll want to toast to his promotion before the sun comes up." Jun-ho looked at me. "I'm going there. You're staying here. I'll leave you a phone and cash. When it's over, I'll send someone to take you anywhere you want to go." "No," I said. I stood up. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but the thought of being left behind, of not knowing if he survived, was worse. You can't walk into the Sapphire Lounge. They know your face. They'll have security looking for you. You won't get within 50 feet of the back room. "And you will?" "I'm invisible," I reminded him. "I'm a server. I'm a delivery girl.
I'm nobody."
If I walk in with a tray, nobody looks at my face. They look at the drinks. Absolutely not. Jun-ho stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "It's too dangerous. I am not risking you. Not after you got me out." "You can't stop me," I said, holding his gaze. "You need eyes inside to confirm he's there before you breach. If you go in blind, and he's not there, you lose the element of surprise and he goes underground. You need a spotter." He stared at me, his jaw working. He wanted to refuse. I could see the protective instinct warring with his tactical logic. He reached out, his hands cupping my face, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones. It was a desperate, possessive gesture. "If they touch you," he whispered, the threat directed at the universe, "I will burn the city down." "They won't see me," I promised, leaning slightly into his touch. "I'll be the background noise. Just like always." He rested his forehead against mine for a brief, heavy second. It was a surrender and a promise. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay.
"But you listen to me."
You wear an earpiece. You stay in the public areas. You confirm the target and you get out. The second you give the signal, you leave. You don't wait for me. You run. I'll run. I lied. I wasn't going to leave him until I knew he was walking out too. The Sapphire Lounge was a study in excess, velvet ropes, pounding bass that vibrated in your teeth, and enough mood lighting to hide 1,000 sins. I walked in through the service entrance, wearing a stolen uniform I'd swiped from a laundry cart near the back, a black vest and a white shirt, indistinguishable from the staff. I carried a tray of high-end scotch, my head down, my posture deferential. "I'm in," I whispered. The tiny earpiece Junho had given me was invisible beneath my hair. "Copy." His voice was in my ear, clear and calm. It grounded me. "I'm in position at the north exit. Don't engage. Just look." I moved through the crowd. I was a ghost. Men in suits brushed past me without an apology. Women in sequins looked right through me. I navigated toward the VIP corridor. A bouncer stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed, scanning the room. He was looking for threats. He wasn't looking for the server clearing empty glasses from the table near the wall. I moved closer, polishing a table that didn't need it. I angled my body so I could see down the hallway. The door to the main private room was open just a crack. I saw a hand gesturing with a cigar. I saw a flash of a gold watch. And then I heard the laugh. It was a loud, braying laugh, the sound of a man who thinks he's untouchable. I recognized the voice. I'd heard it on the phone in the restaurant once, when Junho had taken a call. It was his lieutenant, Min-jae. Visual confirmed, I murmured, wiping a ring of condensation from the table. Room 1. He's celebrating. 3 others with him. 2 guards at the door. Get out, Maya. Now Junho's voice was sharp. I turned to leave, but the bouncer at the end of the hall shifted. He tapped his earpiece and looked directly at me.
He frowned. He didn't recognize me.
The staff here was regular. They knew each other. I was the anomaly. He started walking toward me. I've been made, I whispered, my heart slamming against my ribs. Bouncer approaching. Drop the tray, Junho commanded. Create chaos. I didn't hesitate. I pretended to stumble, sending the tray of heavy crystal glasses crashing onto a table of patrons. The sound was explosive, shattering glass, splashing liquor, screams of surprise. The entire section of the club turned to look. The bouncer lunged forward to grab me, but the crowd was in the way now, people jumping up, shoving back. In the confusion, the fire alarm triggered.
Junho.
The strobes began to flash. The music cut out, replaced by the shrill whoop of the siren. The club descended into panic. I slipped into the crush of bodies, using the stampede as cover. But instead of running for the exit, I looked back at the VIP hall. Min-jae had stepped out of the room, confused, flanked by his guards. He was looking for the source of the disturbance. And then, through the smoke and the flashing lights, Junho stepped out of the shadows of the emergency exit behind them. The confrontation was silent and brutal. The strobe lights turned it into a series of frozen images, Junho moving with terrifying efficiency, the guards dropping before they could draw their weapons. Min-jae turned, his eyes widening in shock as he saw the ghost he thought he'd buried.
I didn't watch the end.
I did what Junho asked. I turned and let the wave of fleeing patrons carry me out into the cool, damp night air. I waited in the alley 2 blocks away, shivering in the rain, hugging myself to keep from falling apart. Every siren made me jump. Every car that passed felt like a threat. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The doubt began to creep in, cold and insidious. Had he made it? Had I led him into another trap? Then, a shadow detached itself from the wall across the street. Junho walked toward me. He was soaked, his shirt clinging to his chest, and he walked with a slight limp, but he was alive. He stopped in front of me, his chest heaving slightly. There was blood on his knuckles, but his eyes were clear. "It's done," he said. The words were final. The threat was gone. I let out a breath that was half sob and stepped toward him. He met me halfway, wrapping his arms around me in a crushing embrace. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, breathing in the scent of me, holding on as if I were the only solid thing in a world of smoke. "You didn't run," he murmured against my skin. "I couldn't," I said. He pulled back, his hands framing my face, his thumbs wiping away the rain from under my eyes. He looked at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "You are extraordinary, Maya. You see the world in a way I never could." "I just see you," I whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, a look of profound pain crossing his face. Then he stepped back. The distance between us felt like a chasm. "This is where it ends," he said, his voice rough. "You can't be part of what comes next. The power vacuum. It will be messy, dangerous." "I know," I said. I knew he was right. I couldn't be the mob boss's girlfriend. I was a server. I needed sunlight and safety. But the ache in my chest was undeniable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope and a set of keys. He pressed them into my hand. "There's a car parked on 5th. It's clean. The envelope. It's enough to start over. Somewhere new. Somewhere safe."
"Junho."
"Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Let me do this. Let me know you're safe. It's the only way I can function." I took the keys. I understood. This was his form of love. Protection. He was giving me my life back, but a better version of it. A version where I didn't have to be invisible unless I wanted to be. "Take care of yourself," I said, my voice trembling. He looked at me one last time, memorizing my face. "I'll be watching," he promised. "Always." From the background, he turned and walked away into the rain, disappearing into the shadows of the city he now owned. I stood there for a long time, the keys heavy and cold in my hand, knowing that every time I felt a gaze on the back of my neck, I wouldn't be afraid. I would know it was him. And that was enough.